little more.
You say so, Matt.
Just one more song by Elbow. We're going to be joined by Richard
Very
later.
nice.
This is Autism America. You're listening to Matthew and Nick. If you want to call us, 877-520-1150. We're going to bring our first guest on right now, Dr. William Frea. How are you, Dr. Frea?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good today.
Fantastic. Dr. Bill, great to have you with us. We're very excited to be partnering with Autism Spectrum Therapies on the show here. And first of all, tell us a little bit about AST and what you guys are up to.
Great. I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure I'm not on the Wanker of the Week segment of your program.
No. That'll only be after you hang up and stop listening. Then we'll put you on.
No, you're Hero of the Week. You're an automatic candidate for Hero of the Week.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yes.
Thanks. Autism Spectrum Therapies, a little bit about it. We've been around for about 11 years now, providing a range of services. We're primarily an ABA agency. We provide early intervention services, classroom support services, positive behavior support. We do social skills, both individually and in groups. Have a range of social skills groups I'd love to talk about. And we're building as rapidly as we can our teen and adult programs, because that need, as you guys know, is just building with just enormous request for services for that. We also have speech and OT services, and we're begun to run camps as well, summer camps, winter camps, and spring camps. So we kind of have a lot going on. We also have a infant toddler program for children who are at risk or for families who just like to learn some skills with working with their children.
Yeah, now, you guys do a lot of work privately with families as well as work with the regional center. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'd say a good portion of what we do is through regional centers and school districts, but we also have private pay programs, and certainly some of the adult services tend to fall in that.
Well, Dr. Bill, I have to ask you, I don't know if you heard the previous segment. I think you did. I don't know if you were listening.
Yes.
But, my own experience with the speech therapy that my son is in is not a positive one. I feel like they are basically just marking time and billing the regional center. I mean, is that something that you guys see with other vendors?
Quite a bit. And obviously without naming names, I think there's a risk just because of the epidemic and the growth on the spectrum. There's a risk, I think, of regional centers reaching out to a lot of different people and them expanding quicker than they're prepared to. That sounds like maybe that's something that you've experienced, where they start putting kids into groups that aren't very structured, that don't have specific goals, that aren't necessarily run efficiently, and by the end of the hour you're wondering exactly what was taught. And I think for speech, it's so critical. I think there's certainly a need to have one-on-one intervention for things like speech and social skills. And when you're bringing kids to a group, that's usually the time that they're generalizing. They're practicing things. Hopefully the group is formed well, where the other kids are learning from each other. They're talking to each other. They're socializing. And you got a list of goals that you're working on for that hour. There's not much you're going to get through in an hour unless you're targeted. And I think that's what I see a lot of people not doing very well. It's not a time for it to be experiential and to share each other's time.
Right, right.
Doing some work.
So along those lines, give us a sort of a quick mental checklist that parents who have children that are going into therapy, whether it's speech therapy or any other therapy, that they should be looking at. What do they want to look at for their service provider? What are some of the red flags, and what are some of the indicators that they're dealing with a quality operation?
Yeah, that absolutely. I think for us, primary on my list, when we're looking at intensive services like early intervention and social skills, which I also believe should be intensive, I think you want to know who's supervising the program. You want to not just meet them and shake their hand, but be able to talk to them and understand how these goals have been selected for your child or your teen. That's number one. Does that person have the credentials to do that? Mm-hmm. You don't want to be their first client. You don't want to be the person that they're gaining their clinical hours with. You want to make sure that in our case we have board certified supervisors. the board certification for applied behavior analysis is a pretty difficult thing to get.
Yeah.
So we're not kind of bringing people unless we have those trained supervisors. I believe we're the only agency that has over 60 board-certified master's behavior analysts on board overseeing the programs. I think that's critical. What is the license and credentials of that? Because ultimately, if your child's doing really well, you want the program to move forward. And if the child's not doing really well, you want the goals to be adapted. Either way, there's work to be done in the supervision aspect of the program. And without that, the rest of the machine just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think you want to be, as a parent, you want to be able to sit. You want to be welcomed into the session. You want to be able to take those skills home with you. It shouldn't be something that's just happening in a room over there. It should be something that
you got to do your homework.
Yeah, what is my homework as a parent? What should I be working on? What can I bring you next week or tomorrow for our next session and say, let me show you how this went. Is this, I'm taking some notes, I'm taking some data. Does this look good? We're trying to do this during dinner time, during bath time, on the swings. We're trying to get, and if it's not working, tell me how to do that.
And how important for, obviously it's important. Is it for the parents to get involved with the therapist and take home tasks like that?
Oh, I think it's critical because that's the bulk of the child's day. We're oriented to the family routine. I think that's a critical thing to understand what the family routine is. Where do our language goals go into your home? Where do our social skills go into your community, into the playgrounds, into the school? And as a parent, if therapy is something that's done by somebody else, then I think there hasn't been a good orientation to what the process is. And the parent should really feel welcome. It's not go sit over there and watch me and you can ask me questions at the end of the session. It's your child. You should feel like if something doesn't look right, that you have a relationship with that therapist to say, I just don't get what you're doing right now. He's been using those words for a year now. Why are you? Oh, okay, that's good to know. We'll move our program along. You have to be engaged, and I think you have to feel like that's a safe thing to do as a parent.
It's a partnership.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think each relationship with each therapist has to be a partnership. You have to take home work. You have to understand exactly what's going on so you can do the work when you get home.
Exactly. I think you need to have an idea of what does success look like. If we're doing well over the next few weeks and we're working on these goals, what does that look like? So I can kind of anchor my expectations for when I'm coming here and when I'm taking my child home and working on these things. The goals shouldn't be nebulous. It shouldn't be something that I can't grasp as a parent and it makes sense in my home life.
Now, to a lot of parents, this is kind of overwhelming. I mean, because there are, maybe 6 therapies they have to go to, and I mean, how do you deal with that as a clinic, basically? Talking to these people, is this something that you have in a meeting prior to beginning therapy, and telling them you have to be involved, and how does that work?
Yeah, well, when we begin, in the paperwork that the parent first signs and we walk through, is our expectation of parent involvement. And it's not that, you're going to be involved or else. It's if we're going to be successful, this is what our time together is going to look like, and this is what we'd like you to keep track of and work on with us. And we're not asking parents to take massive amounts of data or, to go home and read a bunch of books, but we are asking them to be engaged with us goal by goal, so that when we kind of check off a goal and say, okay, this aspect of the language program is going great, is he doing it at home? And can we consider this in a generalization phase? That means that that it's kind of in your court now, and you can come back just and say, we need to back up a bit. But success means we're moving it out of our direct time and into something that's generalizable. And something that you said I think is huge, but like when you said it's overwhelming for a parent to be going to 6 different therapies and keeping track of all those goals and keeping track of what they should be doing, but it's much more overwhelming to that child who's experiencing 6 different people telling them 6 different things in 6 different ways.
That's a very good point.
And they're going home, and where does it fit into my time with mom, dad, my brother, my sister, going to uncle's house, going to the mall? Where do these things go? The only person who's going to do that for the child is the parent. Yeah,
that's very true.
That's a great point. Dr. Bill, you mentioned something about young adults and adults with autism, and this is This is a raging epidemic. Epidemic, epidemic's probably a bad word for it, but
I would call it a pandemic.
The number of people, the number of young adults and adults with autism. What is the best way to train and to provide therapy for those young adults and adults so that they are prepared for everyday life?
Yeah, that is the number one question that we're getting. We've looked at it in a pretty specific way for us in terms of therapy, and we're looking at it from the perspective of independence.
Yeah.
How do we define independence for this client right now? What are the first steps? And then secondly, what is the roadmap? Where does that lead us to? And this is a process also that's with the family. What are they interested in? What motivates them? What would be a positive outcome for this year? And then putting that and helping the family start to put those things into the framework of adult independence. So, I'm not necessarily saying that for a 11-year-old you're going to sit down and start them working on a job, but you are going to be thinking about, right now, what are the things that we can get his hands on, get him engaged in, and start thinking in those terms. Start thinking in terms of, he's really happy when he's doing this with me, and I can think of let's sit together and let's think of a job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs. If this could, over the next 6-7 years, if he can become proficient at these things and feel good about it, then we can start thinking that we can start breathing a little easier about a career.
I think that's great, because one of the things that Temple Grandin said when we spoke to her a couple weeks ago was, take these obsessions that all of our children with this have, and look for that. Look for those things that you can hook onto, and buy into. Most of the time, I think parents are too busy saying, "Oh, they're talking about trains again. They're talking about trains again," but we don't kind of think about that and stop and think about it. All
right, we're going to have to take a break. We're talking to Dr. Bill Frea from Autism Spectrum Therapies.